Hello and welcome to our 7-8 minutes of weekly Torah talk. Our guest today is Rabbi Aaron Shub, Rabbi of Congregation Sharei Tefillah and Director of Jewish Life and Learning at Levy Day School, Portland, Maine. Hello, Rabbi. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Our Parsha in Teitze, in this Parsha, 74 of the Torah's 613 commandments, mitzvot, are mentioned, so it's Parsha filled with many details. These include the laws of things as varied as the inheritance rights of the firstborn and the returning of a lost object. Recounted are the judicial procedures and penalties for adultery and for a husband who falsely accuses his wife of infidelity. Our Parsha also includes laws governing the purity of the military camp, the prohibition against turning in an escaped slave, the duty to pay a worker on time and to allow anyone working for you, man or animal, to eat on the job. Teitze concludes with the obligation to remember what Amalek did to you on the road on your way out of Egypt. The first pasuk of our parsha says, "Ki tetzeh lemilchama al oivecha unetanu Adonai Elohecha biyadcha veshavita shivyo." If you go out to war against your enemies, and the Lord your God will deliver him into your hands, and you take his captives. So Rabbi, let's begin with the broad picture. I mentioned 70-something commandments that we have in this parsha. Do you see any line connecting these 70 plus mitzvot into one big picture?
Yes, it seems like a lot of these mitzvot are connected by the theme of, property, really. A theme of everything, of justice involving everybody, not only preserving the status of ownership, and of not just ownership of objects, but also of human beings, as we see in the case of the runaway slave.
Right.
There's a different kind of, I don't want to, if it's problematic to use, or it's just as problematic to use the word ownership as not to use the word ownership in regards to the traditional Jewish concept of marriage here. The case of adultery is an upset in the proper boundaries of a household, of a family. Rather than a woman being property, it's rather the people belong within this particular framework, and anything which disrupts that is considered sinful and problematic.
And the parsha begins with what might be the most dramatic or most controversial such case, at least to modern eyes, the case of the captive, beautiful woman. So let's talk about how this commandment, how should we understand it today?
Yes, it is a very problematic one. But it's also very rich in what it can teach us as we study it. Of course, we need to acknowledge.
Let's begin by explaining it. What does the Torah say?
The Torah says that when Israel goes out and is victorious in battle and brings home captives, and among the captives there is a beautiful woman, presumably a non-Jewish woman, and a soldier wants this woman, he should have her shave her head, and it's the pasuk says "Va'asta tzipornea," whether that means that she should grow her nails or cut her nails is a matter of debate among the medieval poskim.
Right.
And she shall put on sackcloth and mourn her father and her homeland for a month. And after that, and only after that, can the Israelite man who took her into his house actually take her for a wife. Now, what exactly is involved in this, and what the steps are that make this permissible and make this what the proper steps are to this are a matter of great debate among the medieval rabbis. There's a line in the Gemara that says, "Lo yichatzena b'milchama," that he shall not actively rape her during battle.
Right. So a lot of this involves having to wait. You have to wait to let her shave her head, to let her mourn. Wait because of what? Because we hope that while you wait, maybe you'll cool down and regret it and forget all about it. Is that the goal?
That is exactly the goal. The Gemara says, "Neged yetzahara." This woman is. Let's just first of all say this is morally and in every other way not an ideal situation. This is the Torah trying to make the best of a bad situation.
Right.
Given that, the Torah says that this is neged yitzahara. This woman unfortunately has become, in some ways, a tool for this man to exercise self-restraint and overcome his own impulses. And hopefully this will have the ethical result of him doing what is right by her, by this woman that he's captured. But this is very much about the Jewish man's character and exercise in him forming and improving his own character.
Now tell me, we began this conversation by talking about the fact that many of the commandments we count in this parsha relate to property. So now can we connect the dots? Is this woman a property of the soldier who captured her? Is this about the Torah telling us that even with our own property there are rules of behavior that we must maintain?
So property, as I said, it's a very problematic word to use in the context of marriage. Marriage, kiddushin, is one of those gray areas, which the feminist revolution in Judaism has rightly critiqued. And this is one of the starkest examples of it. She is not his property in that he is not allowed to sell her into slavery. You shall not sell her for money. You shall not enslave her, because you have essentially tortured this woman.
Right.
So no, she is not his property. She is not his property, rather. She is available to him for marriage, and she does not have ultimate freedom in all of this. Rather, the man is under ethical obligations to treat her fairly. She, according to the rabbis, is undergoing a process of a conversion to Judaism against her will. And
another concept that is very difficult for us to understand in our modern eyes.
Absolutely. This is one of the hallmarks of modern ethics is the sovereign self, the rights and power of the individual, and this really clearly flies in the face of that. The human rights that are reflected in the Torah here are the right of somebody not to be sold, not to be unduly tortured, not to be enslaved. Marriage is not something that she has a choice in this matter, in this case. Right. Normally, yes, a woman always does have the right to refuse marriage in Judaism, and everybody has the choice to convert or not to convert. The Eshet Yefator, this beautiful woman captured in battle, is the one exception.
Right. Going back to the larger theme of the Parsha, would you say that this Parsha makes us both most proud of our tradition because of the many laws that we see in this Parsha that seek to achieve justice, return an object to its proper owner, etc., even treating slaves in a manner that was not always the manner in the ancient world. But on the other hand, also makes you cringe in learning about the history of our tradition?
Yes, it's a real challenge for those of us with a modern ethic who want the Torah to speak to us. This needs to be framed with the concept: Lo nitna Torah lemalachei sharet. The Torah was not given to the ministering angels; it's given to human beings who are flawed and are short-sighted. And the fact that this parsha opens up with the mitzvah of Eshet Yafat Torah, the beautiful woman, the captive woman, is the clearest example of that. Ideally, we should live peacefully. Ideally, we should not let our hungers for another person turn that person into an object that satiates our own hungers and lusts. Rather, we should respect them as sovereign beings. The Torah recognizes that under certain circumstances, we will not. And given that we will not, what's plan B? We shouldn't have slaves. The Torah makes it pretty ideal that there should not be slavery. Again, Eshet Yafat Torah teaches us that. You're not allowed to sell her into slavery or use her as your own maidservant. But this is written at a time where slavery was the social norm. Given that there was slavery, how can we treat slaves better than they're normally treated?
Yeah, and as if to emphasize my point on the conflicting message, the parsha ends with the demand to annihilate an entire people.
Yes. How can we understand that today? If we were to use that as morality affirming Torah, I think we need to understand that in a way similarly to how the concept of jihad is traditionally understood in Islam, as an internal battle. Amalek, rather than rather than being an actual nation of living people who we are now commanded to go out and kill. Rather, we should see Amalek as evil itself. We should always remember to fight against evil, whether it's an evil impulse in ourselves or injustice in the world. That is the Amalek that we are commanded to fight against, just as a religious Muslim is commanded to go against their own immoral impulses and strive for something higher in jihad. So the Talmud does tell us that we don't know who's Amalek today. All the ancient nations have been completely mixed up. We can't literally, physically fulfill this commandment, so it needs to take on another meaning.
And one of the nice things about this parsha is that even though many of the laws we see in it are no longer relevant in their ancient sense, we still can learn a lot from them.
Absolutely. One of the things I reflected most on in my rabbinic studies when we were learning Gemara, we spent a lot of time learning Serachi, Kiddushin, Ketubot, and if anybody comes to these texts with feminism as part of their ethic, they're all very, very troubling and problematic. What I found was a useful approach for me, not only intellectually but spiritually, was to follow the discussion around these laws, even if I found the laws themselves problematic. Looking at what the different arguments were within the discussion and keeping track of them and being able to faithfully explain them and retell them. That kind of skill was not only good intellectual skill, but as I said, a spiritual skill that I was able to carry over into understanding the person in front of me. Understanding what a person in front of you is actually saying and feeling and what motivates them. When somebody has a disagreement philosophically with you, what motivates them to hold their point of view? So, yes, there is great value in studying these laws, especially in the more sophisticated levels of Torah text, just for the sake of understanding.
So we just began discussing it, and hopefully some people will continue as they read the Parsha. Thank you, Rabbi, so much, and Shabbat
Thank
Shalom.
You. Shabbat Shalom.
And I think it's time we can also say Shana Tova as well.
Shana Tova.